Venture X from Capital One is the travel card for people always asking,
where next?
You earn 10x miles on hotels and rental cars, and 5x miles on flights booked through Capital One Travel, and 2x miles on everything else you buy with Venture X. Plus, receive premium travel benefits like access to over 1,300 airport lounges. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode 61 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Digital Federal Credit Union, but better known to all of us by now as just DCU. We're on a first-name basis. And whether you're driving off the lot or refinancing, DCU can help you save on your next auto loan with rates as low as 1.49% APR. I'm not kidding. That's how low the rate is. 1.49 APR. You can learn more at dcu.org/auto. Insured by NCUA, membership required. Let me say that one more time. With rates as low as 1.49% APR. Just log on to dcu.org/auto. This episode of the podcast is also sponsored by Jumptown Skydiving. If jumping out of a plane has always been on your bucket list, then this is the time to do it. And why not go to America's oldest skydiving drop zone? Jumptown is conveniently located in Orange, Massachusetts, right off of Route 2. They're open 7 days a week. And Jumptown understands if you work in the service industry that you can't always get time off on the weekends with your friends because that's when you're working and that's when you make your money. That's why Jumptown offers service industry discounts on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays with tandem skydives as low as $185. It's the perfect opportunity to put a bunch of your coworkers together and go skydiving together. And if you're the group leader, for every person you bring with you, it's $10 off of your skydive. Bring 10 people and you jump for free. If you got questions or you want more information, just log on to jumptown.com. And if you want to make a reservation and get on that plane, climb to 13,500 feet up, and then jump out, then call 978-544-5321. Okay, it's only happened a couple times so far that a guest has come on more than once on the Mistress Carrie podcast. Kevin Martin from Candlebox first made an appearance on the podcast with episode 19 last year. We actually did the interview the day that Eddie Van Halen passed away. And in the original part of the interview, we hadn't even heard the news yet. I've known Kevin for a really long time, back when I was working in radio but wasn't even on the air yet. And we've always kept in touch, and I find him refreshingly honest and open. He says what's on his mind. He has very strong opinions, and he's not afraid to back them up. But he's also an incredibly sweet and generous and giving guy that loves what he does. Candlebox is getting ready to release their 7th studio album called Wolves on September 17th. And they're getting ready to hit the road on Thursday, August 5th, starting in Louisville, Kentucky. Kevin and I got caught up on what we've been doing throughout the COVID-19 lockdown, how he's been spending his time. We talked music, inspiration, keeping a band together, family, fatherhood, growing old. And we even ended up talking about Mike Oldfield and the soundtrack from The Exorcist. We had an absolute blast, and I love having him on the podcast. If you missed our first conversation, the link to episode 19 is in the show notes of this podcast. And if you've always loved Candlebox's music, well, allow me once again to introduce you to Kevin Martin from Candlebox.
Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair is so lovely.
Pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown. You're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, Bruce Dickinson here from Iron Maiden. Yes, indeed, Miss Whiplash herself, Mistress Carrie, is here to unchain your brain.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you're listening to, you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
You're on the record, Mr. Martin.
There's nothing I can say that can be used against me?
No, everything. I'm using all of it against you.
Damn it.
You are one of the first artists that I've had on the show twice.
I love that. That's pretty cool.
It's been a year since I talked to you last.
I know. I was just thinking about that. It was literally like right before Eddie Van Halen died.
It was that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no. Yeah, we spoke that morning, and then
I had to call you back and go. If we don't address Eddie Van Halen, we're gonna look like assholes. Can we talk about Eddie Van Halen, please?
Yeah, that was crazy.
How are you holding up?
How are you? I'm good. Geared up to go back on the road. So, I mean, we'll see, everybody in our band's vaccinated, crew's vaccinated. We've all had to sign a kind of agreement waiver that there's no backstage, there's no guests, there's like nothing, It's weird. It's just a weird thing because we're used to playing a show and then going out and having a few drinks at a bar or something.
No.
And now we're not doing that. So, yeah.
A lot of people, I mean, obviously when you and I spoke last year, we're in the height of everything and things are getting canceled and everybody's like, what the hell is going on? How are we going to come back from this or whatever? One of the things that a lot of people don't kind of understand is all of the outside forces that have an impact over the rock show, like what you're talking about, that the insurance companies, the promoters, the agents, the record labels, the managers, the other bands and all of their people, the people that own the venue, the staff. So when you're talking about playing a show in front of people, there's a reason why some shows can happen and some shows can't. There's a reason why vaccinations are required. Like people giving the Foo Fighters shit about needing vaccinations to get into Madison Square Garden. It's not like you, Kevin Martin from Candlebox, can just wake up tomorrow and make a decision about something like this because there's so many outside forces, insurance companies especially, that have an impact over this. And I don't think the average rock fan kind of understands how many lawyers are involved with putting a show on in this day and age.
Yeah, even without a pandemic, it's still, difficult. You always get the emails that say, why aren't you coming to Canada or why aren't you coming to Europe or why aren't you, all those kinds of things. That's always financial. I mean, but this situation is, being vaccinated doesn't mean we're not going to get COVID. You can still get COVID. It's just, you're not going to get super sick from it.
Yeah. And hopefully you won't die. Like get the shot so you won't die.
Yeah. But the reality is, yes, there are all these, underlying forces that we have to deal with when we put a show on. Like you mentioned, promoters, insurance, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on and on and on. So it's not that you just show up and play a show and then everything's hunky dory. There's so many outlying and outside things that we have to consider. God, it's just crazy. And it's never been more kind of obvious, I think, to us musicians than over this past year and having to sit with our agents and look at a contract that says, if somebody tests positive in your crew or your band or on our staff or with anything that has to do with the venue, we have the rights to cancel the show with no guarantee being paid. So if that happens and I'm in South Carolina and somebody tests positive, whether it's on our side or theirs, they don't have to pay me. And I sit there in South Carolina with no money. And I've got, 8 people that are relying on me to pay their salaries. Or, what happened to Buck Cherry, where they tested positive and they had to quarantine for 2 weeks. The expense of quarantining in the middle of a tour is astronomical. So, and this is all on my shoulders. Candlebox is my responsibility, and it's a lot to take on emotionally and mentally, and I'm sure physically that's all going to happen to me at some point, but the stress is going to hit me that I am responsible for 8 people that I care greatly about, financially. So it's a little daunting.
And it's also made more complicated because you're navigating 50 states worth of different mandates and different rules. Whereas before you could go on a national tour and it's like, all right, well, this place got an 11 o'clock curfew and that place got a midnight curfew. And this place, you can take your dick out on stage, and this place, they're going to arrest you. Where now it's like, do we need masks? Is there social distancing? Like, it's 50 different sets of rules now.
Yeah. And, we've had a lot of people say, well, I've got VIP for, whatever show is coming through. Maybe it's Joe Bonamassa or something. I'm just throwing that out there. Why can't I have VIP with you? Well, everybody has their own constitution as to how they want to deal with this. And, just because that artist chooses to put themselves, like Buck Cherry did by doing the VIP packages and the meet and greets, that's how somebody got sick. And I just financially can't afford that, and of course I'm certainly not Joe Bonamassa where I'm making, $300,000-$400,000 a show. And I can take that risk. I make a living touring with Candlebox, but it is not making me a rich human being. It's allowing me to continue to tour and to continue to make records. And it's been 28 years of this band's career that luckily I still have a career, but it by no means, way, shape, or form is making me a rich man. I have to go through budgets, and I have to look at the insurance and the bottom line of that insurance payment of this tour, the tour bus costs, all this. That's why we always do the VIP packages, because that extra money allows us to cover those expenses that we, normally don't have the money to cover. It's just it's a weird world to be in right now touring.
Last time you and I talked, the weather was still warm. This was all, we were still holding out hope that by the end of the year it'll be gone. Yeah. You're still married. I see the ring on your finger.
Yeah, but I have spoken to my attorney several times. He's on speed dial.
It's been interesting. What were you doing since I talked to you, keeping yourself occupied, kind of stuck at home? And in all seriousness, it has tested people's relationships.
Yeah, it has. My wife has a clothing line, so I've been helping her with that. We did the Loverboy video, which was an absolute blast to do. We did that. When did we do that? We did that in March of this year, which was just so much fun because I love Loverboy. I just recently did another one, which I'm not supposed to talk about right now because it's coming out in a couple of weeks, but I'm so happy I was asked to do it. It's a Black Sabbath song that I just adore. But those types of things, those little kinds of popping into a studio and singing backups on somebody's record, or having them send me some files to do some vocals on, that type of thing has been keeping me busy. And, when I spoke to you last, I was at our vacation house in Palm Springs, which is a vacation rental. And I've been running that. That's been, keeping me crazy busy because everybody wants to get out of LA. So of course, why not book the house and spend 4 or 5 days away from LA? So a lot of that stuff is keeping me busy. And then I've, been being a dad, we had to apply for a new school for our son to get into, and, because he's a teenager now. So all those types of things take time. And, meeting with my business manager over finances and figuring out how am I going to survive the next 6 months, which is, that's a scary thing to do as a musician when you've never really had to kind of think about that, or certainly not for the past 10 years. I haven't. And having to deal with the banks and the PPP loans for the guys in the band, and small business association loans to keep this business afloat. It's been a lot. But I have, I've got some great friends that I'm so grateful to, be able to run around with and laugh and joke. And the guys in the band, we did the monthly Zoom meetings, which are a blast. So, whatever. Just stuff to keep myself busy.
Dean DeLeo from Stone Temple Pilots told me recently that helping with the kids' homework definitely taught him where his limitations are as a father.
Yeah.
How was that for you through the school year?
That was really tough. It's funny. I just talked to Dean the other day about a bunch of stuff. I hadn't spoken to him in a couple of years. It was nice to catch up on the phone. Does he not have the greatest laugh ever? I feel he
like
does.
When you can make Dean DeLeo laugh, like it's infectious.
Yeah, he's great. And he's such a lovely guy. I mean, both of them, the brothers are just, beautiful souls. And I love them so much. And, I wish that we played more shows together because I think it's just a lot of fun when we're together. But yeah, trying to be a teacher was one of the most challenging things in the world. I wasn't a great student. So certainly I'm not cut out to be a teacher at all. It was more so what kind of tutor can we find our child, because neither one of us, really had the patience to deal with it. So that was hard. And at the same time, it was sad for me because I wanted to be that parent that, could sit there and say, okay, well, this is how that math problem works out. And do you understand that sort of thing? But I'm just not that guy.
They've done a lot of things to math since we went to school too.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of things.
I thought that math was one of those things that couldn't change, but math is weird now.
It is weird now. Yeah. Lines and dots and whatever.
Yeah. It's very strange. For me, I thought it was a good idea to get married in the middle of the pandemic. So I'm newlywed now.
Congratulations.
Which was interesting because we got married outside and had families sitting in cars and
oh my God,
separated from each other on lawn chairs. We had a COVID safe wedding. It was weird, but it was great at the same time. Motorcycles everywhere and pizzas.
That's great.
But it was cool.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. It was nice to have something happy. You know what I mean? It was nice to have a little, even though it was completely abnormal, what I've noticed with me, tell me if this is how you are, that even the smallest things now that feel normal, I appreciate so much more.
Yeah. Just listen, going outside without a mask on, that was one of the first things that I just was so grateful for. And then of course, LA's back down on, on a mask mandate. But just that 1 month where I could go into my favorite coffee shop and say hi to the people that I hadn't seen in 6 months and order a coffee without a mask on. It was like, I was just so grateful to be able to do that. It's that there's so many little things that you look at now and you just go, wow. I'm breathing today and I'm healthy and I'm awake and I've got my family and my friends. And, a lot of us can't say that, I can't believe that Dusty's gone. That's just so strange too. ZZ Top's one of my favorite bands of all time. What is it? Maybe it's you and I, every time we schedule one of these things, somebody important passes. Maybe we should stop doing that.
Seriously, we should never speak again because we're literally killing rock and roll icons every time we talk.
Oh my God. This is on record, right?
Yeah, dude, I'm definitely recording you for this. But yeah, it is one of those things. I was talking about it. One of the other things since you and I talked last is I'm back on the radio. And
yeah, congratulations for that too.
And I I'm really afraid of all of these pillars of the music in my life and that they're getting older.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Eddie Van Halen obviously was extenuating circumstances. He was far too young, but there are so many. We take for granted Mick Jagger and Keith Richards are just always going to be there. We take for granted that Robert Plant and Steven Tyler and all these guys are there. And it's like when something like what happened with Dusty Hill happened, you just go, oh, wait a minute. These guys aren't gods that live forever?
Yeah, no, it's strange. Certainly is very strange. I think about it, honestly, I think about it every day because, I'm going to be, what am I, 52 now? Yeah, I'm 52 now. I mean, that's like, 50 seemed a million light years away from me when I was 21 years old.
Yeah, but don't you think 50-year-olds back in the day were old? And like 50 now is not what 50, like, do you know what the Brimley cocoon line is? Have you ever heard of this thing?
No.
Okay, this is about to
I'm
make...
fascinated now.
Okay, so you're going to find it on Twitter when we're done, I promise you.
Okay.
So you remember the movie Cocoon?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So when Cocoon came out, I think it was like in 1985, Wilford Brimley was 18,530 days old when that movie came out. You remember in your mind what Wilford Brimley looked like in Cocoon. He was a grandfather.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a Twitter feed called the Brimley Cocoon Line. And when someone gets to the age that Wilford Brimley was in Cocoon, they have crossed the Brimley Cocoon Line.
What?
Paul Rudd, Fred Durst, you, I think, have crossed the Brimley Cocoon Line. So there's no way. I mean, the Golden Girls were in their 50s on the show.
Yeah,
they were in. So
it's true.
So people then were old, whereas J-Lo is your age. J-Lo's hot as balls.
She is. Well, hot as balls.
I mean, I don't.
Whose balls?
Somebody's Satan's balls. She's that hot.
Yeah, no, I mean, yes, I often think of that. I mean, for me, it's just, it's more the reality is if I'm lucky, I'm halfway through my life. You know what I mean? Fingers crossed, I make it to 100. I don't know if I want to
make it to 100, wouldn't you?
But yeah, I mean, I would like to make it to 100 and see my son get married and have grandchildren and all that sort of thing. But it's just it's one of those numbers that when you hit it, you start to think about mortality and those people around you that are your age and that are as mortal as you are. It's just a weird thing to think about that, all of these icons of rock and roll that, are around our age now, to die of natural causes is strange. I mean, the drummer for Slipknot was only 46 years old.
Joe
That's
Jorgensen,
just bizarre,
I know.
Yeah, it's terrible. But that's life. I mean, it goes, but your mind, your mind plays that game on you that says, God, are you halfway through your life? Are you less than halfway through it? What are you going to live to? What's this world coming to, all that sort of stuff. But it's been an eye-opening year for me. Certainly. Yeah.
As a parent, like when you think about like the start of Candlebox, right? When you're young and, you're running naked in traffic and you just think you're immortal because you're young and young people are stupid. Is there anything that you can say to your son to get him to kind of understand, to savor the young? Like, is there anything people could have told us back then to kind of give us the wisdom of age without having to be old? Because wouldn't that be nice?
I just say to him, look, you're going to be my age one day. And I hope you don't have you to deal with, is what I've said to him, which is not the right thing. It's very...
What's that saying? Youth is wasted on the young? Like...
It is. I said to me, he just went away for summer camp. He had 2 weeks at a farm camp with his best friend, and actually about 6 of his best friends in Northern California. It's beautiful scenery. And he complained the whole time. I mean, it was just like, we picked him up and I was like, so how was it? He's going to say, it was awful. Food sucked, blah, blah. I was like, God, man, if I'd had the opportunity to go away when I was his age for 2 weeks with my best friends, I would have said to my parents, I want to go for a month, but it's just, youth is wasted on the young. And I've said it to him many times. You need to just enjoy everything that's happening to you right now. Embrace it, love it, do everything. Don't be afraid of anything. Just, if you want to drop in on a skateboard ramp, you've got a helmet on, drop in. If you want to jump that, tube of stuff on your bike, jump it. I did it. Like I tell them that all the time. I just don't know if they're listening to us.
I've spent a lot of time over this last year since I talked to you, digging through a lot of old archives and stuff because of the nostalgia of AAF being gone. And one of the things that I've been thinking about recently, which is associated with you, is because that Woodstock 99 documentary came out recently, I was there. And so watching the documentary, I'm very conflicted because I was there and I had a fucking blast. But part of the reason why I had a blast was that I went to Woodstock 94. And that taught me a lot of what to expect. Even though the weather was very different, I was very prepared for the unexpected because I was at 94. One of my fondest memories was seeing you guys at Woodstock 94. And at one point, randomly walking in the middle of a field, I literally turned around and bumped into Scott Mercado.
Yeah.
How I bump into someone I know in the middle of Woodstock 94, I will never know. But I've been very nostalgic about those Woodstock shows. So can you what do you think about when you think about that gig?
Well, we were just, we were pleased to be a part of it. I think it was mainly my fondest kind of memory of it is that we were the only band that had a record in the Billboard Top 10. And that felt pretty good. We were obviously, the Friday night was a last minute ad. So they added us and Live and Collective Soul and Violent Femmes. And, it was the, let's throw something at the wall and see if it sticks night. And it stuck pretty good. All those bands went on to be, greatly successful. And of course the Violent Femmes were already a huge success, but for me, it was the experience of that stage spinning around, and there are 300,000 plus people, and the level of energy from the crowd, the excitement factor backstage with the bands. It was all just, it was all pretty overwhelming and exciting at the same time. I don't, the only negative experience I had there was when we went to the press room, for the press tent, and we're introduced as, the only band that had a number 7 record, record in the Billboard Top 10 and blah, blah, blah. And they introduced us as Candlebox. Were there any questions? And nobody asked a question because nobody cared. So that was like really the only negative experience I had. And nobody cared because the Friday night was, a bunch of bands that everybody thought were, throwaways and weren't going to end up doing anything. They were more concerned about getting Metallica interviews or Aerosmith interviews or Chili Peppers or Green Day or the Cranberries or, or any of those other D-Light or whatever. So, we were just kind of like a second thought, and rightly so. I mean, it was like, fuck, nobody knew who we were. We were just this new band out of Seattle that, at that point had sold 1 million records, and we're selling on average 150,000 records a week, because we had a song called Far Behind that was doing really, really well for us. That was about it. I think in everybody's eyes. So for us, we were on tour with Metallica, which was amazing. We were happy to be there.
One of the other reasons why I think a lot of rock fans are waxing poetic about, nostalgia right now is all of the 30th anniversaries that are happening, because 1991 was just such a ridiculous year in music.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of talk about Seattle because of all of the giant albums that came out that really just changed everything. And one of the things that I'm ashamed to say, having done a lot of reading recently about the Nirvana, Nevermind, Pearl Jam 10, that whole era, I didn't know who Tina Bell was.
Tina Bell.
Bam Bam, who people consider the godmother of grunge.
Yeah.
And I had never even heard of her before. Meanwhile, this whole generation of music that came out of Seattle was directly kind of inspired by her and her band in the 80s.
Yeah, Bam Bam. God, Jesus, you're taking me back like 100,000 years really, really fast. That was, God, I mean, I hadn't even thought of that in literally no one's brought that up to me in 20 plus years. That's amazing. You just said that. I mean, I'm like thinking about the first day that I, heard Bam Bam and was running around in downtown Seattle. I mean, you've taken me back to like being a 14-year-old kid all of a sudden right away. Yeah. I mean, inspired everything. I mean, was behind all of that. A lot of people, would say that Mark Arm was because of, Green River and all that sort of thing. But certainly Bam Bam was probably the first of it,
especially because we're at this amazing place with rock and roll and women finally getting to a point where, like I just talked to Annie Bierzak from Black Veil Brides recently. And, we're talking about how we've gone from the place where like bands are like female fronted to bands. It just so happens that there's a woman in the band. Like we've gotten to a point now where there's just so many women in rock and roll that it's not a novelty anymore. And
it's great.
And I always look back at those women whose shoulders women of my generation are standing on, the Stevie Nickses, the Joan Jetts, the Wilson sisters, and I was really mad at myself that I had never heard of Bam Bam before. And I've just been reading a lot about, guys in Pearl Jam and talking about how influential that was to the creation of the Seattle scene and all the bands that came out of the city.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. That's man, I'm like literally going to go and start pulling up all that stuff. That's amazing, man. I'm literally a 14-year-old kid right now. My head is just racing with so many thoughts about that period. God, I haven't heard that name in 20 plus years. That's amazing.
And Seattle is continuing now because somebody I had a chance to meet on the podcast, I think since I talked to you, was Aaron Jones, who is this.
He's brilliant.
It's unbelievable. And there's this whole new generation of Seattle music. You guys are way more known for your music than your football team. Subtle nudge from Boston here, just a little.
Hey, that's fine. You go ahead and you can keep nudging that one. You're the greatest team in the history of football. Yeah, it's Aaron is that kid's just a force to be reckoned with. I am excited to see if his success really sparks that movement in Seattle, or people start paying attention to the Seattle music scene again, because he's really just a brilliant artist, and what a voice and great songs. And there are great bands in Seattle still, I don't know if you're going to see that kind of same historically successful movement of Seattle bands, but you certainly will see bands that people are going to pay attention to and may sell, 100, 150,000 records every time they put an album out, which would be amazing if they did that. But we're, as a society, we're so, everything's future trash for us. So it's kind of like, if we get attracted to something, how long do we stay attracted to it? It's just weird to think if Candlebox were to put a record out right now, if anybody would even listen to it,
Well, it's kind of the point of the interview, Kevin.
Yeah. It's just, would it? Would anybody care? Because there's so much music right now. There's so many bands, and I would hate to be a new band right now. I just would hate it. It would be the most awful experience ever. And that's not to say that we shouldn't have them. We shouldn't have these guys that are trying to come up. I just, it would scare the hell out of me.
Artists like Aaron are giving me hope to that cynicism about rock being dead, that people are finding, a new voice, that they're finding a new way of communicating through rock and roll, that whether it's a recombination of the hip hop influences and, we've gone full circle where rock kind of influenced hip hop in the early stages, and now hip hop is kind of reinvigorating rock and roll again. And it kind of gives me hope that it is still possible to find a lane and try to do something fresh and new, and to not just think, well, between Jimmy Page and Tony Iommi and Angus, they wrote all the riffs, so there's nothing left to write,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's unfortunately one of the issues I think that everybody's, running up against is that a lot of these young musicians, I don't know if they, of course, Greta Van Fleet, who fell off the Led Zeppelin truck, but do bands really, are they really influenced by Pink Floyd? Are they really influenced by Zeppelin, The Who, The Clash? And are they dangerous enough to play it? I think the problem with rock and roll is that it's not dangerous anymore. And what I mean by that is, so these musicians are so kind of concerned with having a hit and sounding like some other band and having the same producer produce their stuff that did, this band, and they all play the same guitar heads and they all play the same guitars, and nobody's really reaching for anything differently. And they're trying too hard to be too good, like the next Theory of a Dead Man or the next Breaking Benjamin or something like that. And rock used to be dangerous, and we used to say what was on our mind when we wanted to say it. We weren't afraid of saying something that pissed somebody off. I mean, you're supposed to, when you're making art, you're supposed to be challenging intellect, and you're supposed to be challenging people's, opinions and views and religious understanding or conservative, liberal.
Well, that is art's point in society, is to make
exactly.
Is to ask the questions.
And rock bands aren't doing that right now. It's just so safe. It just, I mean, I've said that, the example several times. I've used the example of Five Finger Death Punch when I forget the singer's name. He had a meltdown in Memphis, and
Ivan Moody.
And and the band kind of got on their socials, or maybe it was management, I don't know, and apologized. And I tweeted back, I was like, fucking Guns N' Roses never apologized for anything. You're called Five Finger Death Punch. Don't apologize. If your fans don't understand, they don't understand. We're human beings. First of all, we're visceral. That's why we're musicians. We're insecure. That's why we're musicians. We're aggressive and angry and frustrated, but we have empathy and we have all these things. So it's okay for us to, have a complete meltdown on stage and walk off and have the fans go, "What the fuck?" And you just turn around and say, "Shit happens. You had a bad day," and leave it at that. But to go out there and try to smooth it over, and I just have a problem with that. And listen, it's their prerogative to do that. But I just think with a name like Five Finger Death Punch, you should be like, "Fuck you. This is who we are," and our singer's crazy because you've been to our fucking concerts. And there are a lot of bands that do that,
A lot of that was tied to, addiction. And I mean, one of those shows happened in Massachusetts, and I was on the air and people were calling, screaming because they were mad. And that's one of those success stories where the band rallied around Ivan and they got him sober. And the band's back playing giant arenas again. And they're in the studio working on new music. And it's like, and the fans are there, like you said, the fans are going to stick by you because they get it and they understand. And that's one of the things that I think differentiates rock audiences from a lot of other genres of music, is that once the fans love you, they love you forever.
And I'm not, listen, I'm certainly not trying to diminish, what the band did for Ivan at all, because I think it's amazing. And a lot of times you have to go to, I mean, there were times that I wish that I had said that to Pete, you have to get sober, because he was a mess for the first, 12 years of our career. But my only point about it is that the reason you get into rock and roll is because you have something to say, and you want to say it, and no one's going to deter you from saying that. But the minute you start apologizing for your opinion is the minute you start, in my opinion, you start losing your credibility as an artist, because you don't have to apologize for what you're going through. If you're an addict and you're going through that addiction, don't apologize about it. Do what you need to do to get yourself sober, and then you can make your amends. And I'm sure that's probably what he did. I don't know, and I'm only using it as an example as to what I'm saying about.
Well, I mean, rock and roll is storied with those struggles. Yeah. It made rock notorious.
Yeah.
And like what you said, it's dangerous. It's supposed to be unpredictable and on the edge.
Yeah. And it's not anymore.
You bring up Pete, and when you get ready to go out on this tour, you're going to end up at home and you're putting the original lineup of the band together for a couple of home shows.
Yeah.
This is what I don't understand about bands, which is probably a reason why I'm not in one, besides the fact that I have no musical talent. I'm Sicilian and Portuguese, right? So my poor husband, I'm going to remember every fight, every curse word, every eye roll, and it all gets tucked away. When you're in a band, especially when you're struggling with stardom and money and addiction and all of these things, and you fight, and then somebody leaves the band, or somebody gets kicked out, and then they come back, and then they leave again, somehow you guys always manage to get together for these home shows. And you've still, all these years later, been able to have that mutual respect, understanding, love for each other, to be able to do that. That's kind of crazy. Because usually when people leave bands, they pull the pin, toss the grenade, and walk out the door, You're
absolutely correct. And the thing that's interesting about us is, we were four guys that didn't know one another. Scott and I were the only two members of Candlebox that had any sort of relationship whatsoever prior to us forming. So we're kind of like, a boy band that was put together by Simon Cowell, except his name is Kelly Gray. And Kelly introduced us to Pete, and my friend Sarah introduced us to Barty. I think for us, what it was we had a really long sit down in 2006 when that Best Of record was coming out that Warner Brothers was releasing. And we all just discussed what it was that we were feeling and what those emotions were. And we got it out on the table, because it was, if we're going to go out and do this, we have to clear the slate. This needs to be a clean slate. We have to be able to look at one another with the respect we had for one another when we started this band, in order to continue making music and to continue and move forward. And we pretty much said everything that we had on our minds. I spoke my piece, Scott spoke his, Barty spoke his, Pete spoke his. Pete was sober at that point, 6 years, which was amazing. And it made all the difference in the world for the band, Pete's sobriety. So, and now, Pete and Barty and Scott all have great careers outside of what they had with Candlebox. So for us to get back together, it's really just a week of hanging out with some old friends and playing some music that really gave us all the life that we have. And we respect that, and we don't take it for granted. And I think that's why it's easy for us to do these shows this way, is because we all know, without each one of us, this never would have happened.
When you put out a new album, like you're going to put out Wolves, do you hear from them? Does the ex-girlfriend call to tell you how hot your new girlfriend is? Do you hear from them? Do you get feedback on the music from them? How does that work?
Yeah, Barty called me. He was like, "Man, I love My Weakness." And I was like, "Thanks, dude." And he's like, it's such a cool song. Pete texted me when from Let Me Down Easy. He was like, "Dude, I love this song. So cool. Peter Cornell, brilliant. Oh my God." Let him know I said so. And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Cool." Scotty's the same thing. He's like, "You ever need me to fill in for anything? I'm happy to do it. I love this new record." So, Candlebox was never the sum of its parts. We were always the whole. And I think that's why our fans have continued to grow with us and move with us every single record we made. You know, when we got back together and Pete and Scott and I wrote Into the Sun, and then because Barty had left to go back to be an attorney, and then we wrote Love Stories and Other Musings after that. You know, that all happens with growth of character and you know, just understanding, you know, who you are and what you're capable of. And I just expanded when Pete and Scott left, before I did Disappearing Airports. I just expanded on the growth that was happening with musicians that I felt replicated what those players were capable of that I had, Barty and Pete and Scott. And you know, it's still an extension of the band, but the only thing that kind of hasn't changed is the voice. You know what I mean? And I think that's really, if anybody talks about Candlebox, it's not, they don't know my name. They just know the song Far Behind and that voice. And that's kind of why I say that, you know, it was never, oh, Peter Cletton, Barty Martin, and Scott Mercado and Kevin Martin and Candlebox. It's like, I love Candlebox. And I think that's why we're still here.
You don't have a date scheduled near me, which I'm kind of upset about, but I'm not going to take it personally.
Next year, next spring.
And so I was like, oh, does this mean I have to go to Seattle to go see the original lineup again? Because I would really like to see that.
You may have to do that.
Yeah. If I'm, you know, I mean, depending on where the world is at.
Yeah.
When you and I talked last, there's a couple things on my checklist that I want to see if you did or not. Last time you and I talked, you were talking about putting a drum kit in the house to control your anger. Have you done that?
No. No.
Nope. Still angry. Are you still obsessed with yacht rock?
I am. I have dug really, really deep into it. Just because it's so easy to listen to, you know, I mean, it's in the background. But I've actually moved on to, I have another station that I'm kind of obsessed with now, which is the Roxy Music Station, which is just beautiful. And I love Brian Ferry and I love Brian Eno, and anything from early Roxy Music to the later stuff that Brian did solo, both Brian Ferry and Brian Eno. I love that kind of music. And I think maybe it's only because I grew up listening to it because of my sister. I mean, she loved America. She loved Bread. She loved Christopher Cross, you know, and at the same time, she loved Blondie and the Ramones. And so she's an interesting, maybe I'm more like my sister than anybody else in my family now that I think about it, because of that, you know, I mean, she really was the most influential person on me musically, I think, in my entire existence as a human being.
You bring up Christopher Cross. I'm reading all these tributes to Dusty Hill, and I had no idea that Christopher Cross and Dusty Hill were like friends. And he released this glowing statement about, obviously, what an amazing influence Dusty Hill was. And I was like, it made me like Christopher Cross even more. Because, like, I'm not going to apologize for liking the music because it's just fucking cool. But I was like, yeah, Christopher Cross, like, this is ZZ Top guy. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, he's, we played a show with him in Vegas for our agent. Like, there was some sort of agency conference going on in Vegas, and we played, shared the stage with him. And I was like, I think I even Instagrammed about it. I was like a little kid watching him play. And then we were sharing a dressing room, and I was talking to him after the set. And I was like, man, I did not know you were like some metal shredder guy, you know, in the 60s. He's like, oh yeah, I was crazy metal dude. And then I just kind of picked up an acoustic one day, and I was like, that's so weird. And then he told me how old he was, and I was like, what? I mean, he does not look like he's in his 70s. He still looked like he was a 56-year-old guy.
Brimley Cocoon line, man. The Brimley Cocoon line. But
he spoke about ZZ Top quite in depth about how Dusty kind of influenced him and inspired him when he was young, because he got that first record and just fell in love with it. Yeah.
You got to write down all these conversations that you've had with all of these bands between the Neil Peart conversations, the Eddie Van Halen golfing conversations, the Christopher Cross is a metalhead conversations. It's like you got to put all these stories that you have of all these backstage conversations together into some kind of book.
Yeah, maybe. I've been asked to write a book several times, and I've got some stories to tell. But, we're working on a documentary right now, a Candlebox documentary that will celebrate 30 years of the band, which will come out in 2023. And, I'm telling a lot of these stories in that. And, I'm telling a lot of stories in that, the real history of the band and a lot of those conversations I've had. We're interviewing some amazing people that were there along the way. And I'm just, it's weird, man. I think about it all the time. Like if I knew then what I know now, and if I shared now what I knew then, I don't know if that's such a good thing.
You would be like in those time travel movies where if you go back in time, you're going to change the outcome of the future by telling too much. Story. Well, if you need anybody to reflect on the Boston part of the Candlebox story, you let me know, because I know that
I would love to interview for that. Yeah.
Because it's always been that weird. Boston is a way of like adopting artists from other places and going, yeah, they're ours now.
Yeah. I love that about Boston.
We don't care where they're from. They're ours now. We're just going to kind of own them. And you guys were one of those bands, obviously. We were. We still are, surprisingly, every time we come through there. One of the other things I've been watching, because I cyberstalk your Twitter and whatever, a lot of bands, a shocking number of bands, got into day trading and cryptocurrency. Did you get into this now too? Are you mining in the basement? Are you like driving up your electric bill?
No, I'm not mining for cryptocurrency. I invested in it. It's a good thing to invest in if you have an understanding and you're patient with it. It's always long-term is what you kind of have to look at. And, being a musician, I don't want to be doing this when I'm 65 years old. I would like to have a cushion to fall back on. I wish that I had invested in it a lot sooner. But it's an opportunity for rapid gains. It is the future of commerce. It's, basically you can look at cryptocurrency as, one of them's a lira and the other's a pound, and then the other one's a Deutsche, mark, and you kind of the currencies of the world that we had. And now you've got the euro, which took over all of those. But if you look at it as a long-term investment that you're not going to watch every single day and worry about, and you set your market buys and things, it's a great way to make a living. I'm not a day trader. I can't look at a computer screen longer than 30 minutes just because I get bored with it. But I do have my investments that are doing well, and I've got a group of guys that work for an investment firm that call me up and say, hey, we've been watching this one grow. You may want to throw a little bit of something in that. But the cryptocurrency, I could never be a miner for it. I wouldn't even know. I don't even know how to put a computer together, for God's sakes. I can barely sing a song.
You talk about youth being wasted on the young, and if you could go back in time, right, and you could go back to height of Candlebox, million records, money flying around, what would you tell yourself not to buy? What did you do that was just stupid with your money back in the day that you just go, I can't believe I was so young and so stupid?
I didn't do anything stupid with my money. I bought a Porsche.
That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, like the fun rock and roll stuff.
But I could afford it. It's like I bought it, and then I turned around and I sold it. I made money on the resale, and then I bought another one, and I turned around and I sold it, and I made money on it. If you buy exotic cars and you don't wreck them, they don't really lose their value. I think the stupidest thing I did was I got married, before my wife now. And that was the dumbest thing I did, because I knew I shouldn't marry her. And everybody told me we shouldn't get married. And that was probably the biggest financial mistake I ever made, really, with the band.
Well, hopefully you get it right this time. That's
well, 20. I've been with her 20 years now, so
that's what I mean.
If I fuck this up, I get half of it.
Me, same thing. Like this is number 2, and I just told him, like, first one lives, second one You're not going to. I'm just letting you know now. Like,
let your family know.
Yeah, and
start looking.
And I'm recording it, so it's like it's out there. People are going to know.
Yeah.
One of the things, a question that kind of grew organically out of all these amazing interviews that I've been able to do on the podcast now, and I can't wait to hear your answer because this isn't something that I asked you. From a songwriter's perspective, if you can look at all the songs of all the eras, of all the genres, from a songwriter, not just a music fan, but put your songwriter hat on, give me an example or two of songs that are good songwriting examples that you covet and go, God, I wish I wrote that song. And explain to me why from a songwriter's perspective.
I mean, David Bowie Heroes. It's the perfect song. It meanders. The melody never changes. You're hooked from the first note of the song to the closing of the song, and we could be heroes just for one day. I mean, how do you even conjure up that saying? And the other thing that's interesting about it is he never sang the song the same live. If you look at that song, the number of times he performed it that you can find on YouTube or whatever, he never sang the verses correctly the way it was recorded, which I love that. I love that he's just like, I'm going to sing this one here. And then the next verse he comes around, he's like, oh, that's the closer, but I'm going to sing it just because I like it. I'm feeling it. And I loved, I mean, there's so many songs that Bowie did like that, but I just think it's the perfect song. The tone, the drums, the wailing guitar, the way he performs it, the sincerity in his voice, and then the lift when he goes into the I Remember part. There's this kind of sense of loss that he had such a innate ability to put in his approach at singing, that you just felt, God, who's he singing about? I mean, he was recorded in Berlin, so I'm certain it had to do with, probably the war or the struggle of the German people dealing with the emotion of what they had, caused in the late 30s into the 40s, and the number of deaths in the Jewish community. And there's probably so much attached to the song that it's just fascinating that he was able to just produce a song like that. And then another one would be, God, there's a lot. I would have loved to have written, I mean, God, it's tough. It's like Born to Run from Springsteen, or God, there's got to be something by, The Clash, Rock the Casbah is a perfect song. It's just, it's pop, it's punk, it's rock. It's imperfect in its approach. The counter attack of the drums against the reggae guitar patterns. It's everything that the Clash was good at, but they were absolutely brilliant on that song. And I love the Clash, probably my favorite band of all times. And that song, it's, a lot of people would say a London Calling or, White Riot, or those are great, of course, all great songs. But I just think, I think that's just like the Combat Rot's a brilliant record as well. So Rock the Casbah, man, I think it's super intuitive. It's a brilliant, brilliant track.
Well, those are two examples of artists that did exactly what we talked about. They asked the questions. They were reflective of the time and the era they were in, and they asked the questions.
Yeah.
And tackled hard things. Bowie, right up until the day he died, tackling tough things, including his own illness and death.
Yeah.
Putting it all out there.
Yeah. Blaming MTV for the lack of black musicians being on their show. Yeah. he point blank said, "You guys are responsible for this. You don't play enough black musicians." And that was in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, when you go back and you look at certain artists, you just go, God, what would the world be like if they weren't here? Like, the world would be so different without Bowie. The world would be so different without The Clash.
Yeah. I mean, 100%.
Nothing's changed with the release of Wolves.
Nope, September 17th.
Everything is still on track, no matter how crazy the world's getting. Candlebox made a plan.
Crossed.
God damn it, it's happening.
Yeah.
And you mentioned stuff in the spring. So obviously these tour dates that you're going to do late summer, ending in Seattle with the reunion shows after the new year in 2022, there's...
Continuing on.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a bunch of stuff for the spring worked out now that we'll be announcing, I think probably around October, and then summer dates as well next year. So it's just really about, we want people to hear this record, and we want to put the necessary time behind it that it needs, to support it.
From what everybody's saying, provided variants and vaccines and, like extenuating circumstances, next year could be the busiest and most exciting year in live music history with the number of shows and tours that are going out.
Yeah. It's good. It's going to be difficult to find space in there for a band like Candlebox, because there's a lot of major tours taking off next year. And we're still a 1,500 seat venue band. So, we're really that's why we're just pushing really hard with this record. We want to make sure that everybody hears it and hope that we have, a hit on our hands that allows us to find that space in between all those majors next year.
Before I let you go, here's the open-ended question. Kevin Martin, are we going to be okay?
As a society? I don't know.
As a planet, as a society, as anything.
As a planet.
We've been through a lot. Are we all going to be okay?
I don't want to be a downer, but I do think that Mother Nature is finding, she's finding a way to clean herself up because we didn't do it when we had the chance. Are we going to be okay? Maybe. I think if we as a society can find empathy again and respect one another and respect one another's opinions and not let politics or politicians lead us astray and focus on the big picture, which is we have to get this planet healthy, and we have to be healthy with it. And that means taking care of one another. I mean, the homeless situation here in Los Angeles is absolutely out of control. We have, I think it's 14 people a day on average go homeless in Los Angeles County. And then Southern California is 14 million people. So that in itself is an enormous problem. And I haven't the slightest idea how to fix that. But I do believe that if we don't fix this planet and we don't pay attention now, it was fascinating. I don't know if you saw this, this thing that they did in the desert in Dubai a couple weeks ago, where it's called cloud seeding, where they figured out how to create rain. They created a monsoon in Dubai, and it's basically these pods go up into the clouds, and they send these electrical pulses which pull the clouds together, create rain. That's something that I think is one way that we can reverse a lot of what's going on, because the wildfires are fueling a lot of these greenhouse gases, and a lot of what is happening around the world is caused by those. So if we can figure out how to create rain and put these fires out rapidly, which reduces the chance of mudslides because rain is allowed to find its footing in the mountains and the hills. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen. But
it's a crazy notion, the stuff that you're saying, right? Like, imagine us being your son's age and somebody's like, we're going to make a monsoon in the sky. with like lasers.
Yeah. I mean,
it's insane.
It's crazy. Yeah.
You know, there's a rover on Mars, and the guy that published and released Tubular Bells was just orbiting the Earth. Like,
that's so. That story, that guy. I mean, 19 years old, he did everything by himself. Tubular Bells. I don't know if you've heard the whole song.
Mike Oldfield? Oh, I have it on vinyl.
It's insane.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me.
But it came out on Virgin Records. So Richard Branson released Tubular Bells, and then last week was like flying around the planet.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. And Mike, and he needs that, Mike Oldfield needs to be like, he needs a Grammy for that album, because I mean, it's I don't know if people even know the story behind it.
We
can talk about that some other time.
Is that The Exorcist? Yeah. Which they
But they only looped the first, for The Exorcist, it's like the first 2 minutes of that song is what they looped.
It's like a whole symphony towards the end. It's crazy.
It's insanity. And the guy comes in and says, this English guy comes in and says, rhythm guitar. And his guitar comes in. It's like fucking mind blowing.
That's how I should have known that I was going to end up really weird as an adult, is that when I was a kid, I had the Exorcist theme on vinyl, and that's what I used to listen to when I was a kid. So none of this...
It still creeps me out.
Yeah. And none of this should be a surprise. And they just announced a $400 million deal. They're making an Exorcist trilogy.
Wow.
With the mom.
That's awesome.
Helen, is it?
Yeah, Helen Burstyn.
Yeah, she's coming back.
Amazing.
Yeah. Can't wait.
I love her.
Yeah. That movie is still...
Scares the shit out of me still.
That and Jaws, those were formative.
Yeah.
Especially growing up in Massachusetts, because they filmed it. So like every kid that was driving distance to Cape Cod was like, I'm not fucking going in the water, bro. I'm going in there. There's a whole generation of us that are like, I don't swim in the ocean because fuck that noise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now they're bringing the Exorcist.
I'm right there with you.
Well, it was so great to catch up with you. I'm glad that you're still married. You guys haven't killed each other, that things are good, that the record's coming out.
Thank you.
It's, we have these check-ins now, and
I love it.
The world is starting to, I'm back on the radio. Things are starting to find its way. So next thing is, to get you in person so we can hang out for real when the insurance agents say it's okay.
I hope so. I look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, me too. It was good to catch up. Congratulations on the new record finally coming out.
Thank you so much. It's good to see your face.
Yeah, you too. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, sweetheart.
See ya.
Bye.
There he is, Kevin Martin from Candlebox. The new album, Wolves, comes out on September 17th, and the tour starts on August 5th. Now, if you're looking to find out if they're coming to your town, the show notes of this podcast has Kevin Martin's social media links, all of the band's links, including the website to get the tour dates, and all of the info about the album. It also has a link to the corresponding playlist. Now, every full-length episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast has a corresponding playlist that is full of all of the music that we talked about in this episode, including Mike Oldfield and Tubular Bells. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss anything from the Mistress Carrie podcast. New full-length episodes come out every Wednesday, plus every weekday you get the Situation Report. The Sit Rep is all your music headlines and rock news in less than 5 minutes every weekday. Thanks once again to our sponsors, Digital Federal Credit Union at dcu.org and Jumptown Skydiving at jumptown.com. As always, you can find me online at mistresscarrie.com. And you can always join me live on my Facebook page every Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern for my video show, Cocktails in the War Room. The Mistress Carrie podcast, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.